I've worked with Jameela Jamil, I've worked with like the Bitch Sesh girls, but the largest one was Storytime with Seth Rogen. The word I is automatically closing the doors for a listener. If I'm pressing play on my little Pocket Casts app and I hear a, "Hey guys, how's it going?" I'm like, but it's just me in my car. I have a lot of ideas about how to include the listener. A producer can be there right from the beginning, and sometimes having them as a collaborating partner will really help set up a lot of the success. Ultimately, working with the celebrity and the host, it's really their vision. What is the host needing? What is he talking about? What is she talking about right now? What is she going to talk about into the future? And what's my plan A to Z of what they will need?
Amelia Chappelow, welcome to How Do I Podcast?
Hi.
We have so much to cover today. Your career, when I was going through and doing my research, I'm like, oh, this woman, oh my gosh, you've been so part of so many incredible projects. You've brought so many things that we love and appreciate to life as well.
Aww.
So thank you, firstly, for everything that you've done. For someone who hasn't come across you before, can you take us on a little whirlwind of all of the projects that you've been a part of?
Okay, so to begin with, I was a radio and online producer, and it would have been 25 years ago when I first started at the ABC, and I was in a country area radio station, very traditional media, legacy media, what I call it now.
Yep.
And so I was in a very unique position when I started my career because it was specifically radio and online producer. And the ABC had a raft of, I guess it would have been innovation funding, especially for the regional areas to work in the country. So what online was when I started was essentially every radio station had its own webpage, and it was a static page.
Of course.
So it just said, this is where you can listen, this is, where you'll find the station and the address, and this is how you can write letters. And there was probably just a photo of the team on the website. And I had been writing blogs for a little while through university, and so I was like, can I start blogging? And they were like, what is a blog? And is it an article for a news article or something? So that's where I began. And my first big job was in radio Mecca, was in Sydney. And so it's the largest market for radio in Australia. And my job was to be the drive producer at Triple J. And so that was a big leap for me. I'd been applying for jobs at Triple J for a little while and knew a lot of the managers and staff just through ABC. And so that was my big sort of break in a way. But obviously to begin at the ABC in general was like hard work. And I loved doing all the regional stories where you learn everything. So I reported, I presented, I produced, and of course wrote a lot of online articles, blogs. So from an early career, it was very much radio focused, but always with an online twist or just 50-50 with what my work was.
Yeah.
And so I had about maybe 14 years in total working with Triple J, and I worked with lots of hosts, lots of programs, lots of segments, lots of podcasts. Now, during the time that I was working there was a lot of global work and attention that just naturally came because of the style of music. It was the indie pop of the 2005 through, when was I there? 2005 to 2014. So it was a real kind of a digital era, very global awareness. There's a lot of bands that were from Australia that were making their mark around the world. Wolfmother won a Grammy. There was like those kind of era of Australiana in the global space. And the segment that I worked on was like a version. I modernized it. I launched the podcast together with the crew there at Triple J. And because of that, there was a YouTube presence. And then all the music magazines around the world used to write about the segment. So I loved that. I loved a little bit of attention from Pitchfork and all the sort of like music blogs in the US.
Yeah.
So yeah, my radio and digital crossover was sort of beginning there. But the big podcasting projects outside of Like a Version, because we launched that in 2008, so definitely an early podcast era.
Yes.
But I started making my first podcast, I guess, when I was living overseas. And so I've only recently moved back to Australia, but I was in China, New York and LA for almost 11 years. And during that time, I worked on some indie podcasts that were very close to my heart. and some very big podcasts as well that I got to launch. So the small ones, my favorite one is Linda Marigliano's Tough Love. Linda is a Triple J host she's one of my good friends. So she's a beautiful, friendly, real person with an amazing story, which we created the whole podcast about. And we did that just together, just her and I. I've worked on so many different comedy shows, a few documentaries, launched shows, picked up shows, grown shows, but the largest one was Storytime with Seth Rogen. So I was part of that production team and launched that show. So from a small indie show all the way to working with people like Seth Rogen in the States and, some other celebrity chat shows as well.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, when I was going through, I was like, and this one and this one. It was really cool. And I think, coming from that background to then going overseas and bringing your voice overseas is something I'm so excited to talk to you about today is like, what that role of a producer actually is, and now your role now as well, because I think so many people, they tune into a podcast and they're like, I love this, and don't really think about all the things that go on behind the scenes, particularly for those big shows. Like there are huge teams that go into that, and if you've been a part of them, you've seen it firsthand and also created some of that as well. So I'm so excited to talk to you about that. With those shows that you had over there, what was it like working with, some of these really big celebrity shows?
Yeah, some of them you can have definitely creative input, like a project management style producer. There's all these different ways that you can be part of a team or lead a team. But ultimately working with the celebrity and the host, it's really their vision. A lot of the time they would ask for guidance or what works or what doesn't work, sometimes even guesting. So I felt like it always depends on how much the host wants to tap in or let it just run. And then even down to the concept and the style of show as well, because there's a lot of improvised comedy shows. They don't need to have a producer from Australia come in and say, that's not funny at all. I would never have assumed. I'm happy to giggle. I'm definitely happy to giggle.
Yeah.
But I would never have assumed that I could direct or share my thoughts in that way because, some of these people, absolutely true professionals. I didn't work directly with Conan, but it's the Conan universe, of podcasting. The manager who hired me essentially launched that show with Conan and his team. So it's definitely where people are true professionals in their field, and especially when it comes to the craft of comedy. So your role it does change around depending on the content.
Yeah, absolutely. And so coming in, if we were putting like a broad overarching bucket on what a producer does, what sort of things are they looking after typically?
So I would say everything, but at the beginning of a project as well, it would be perhaps just like a first conversation or a spark of an idea. Sometimes that comes from the producer. There's a lot of development that can come from working in collaboration with people. So from my point of view, a producer can be there right from the beginning, and sometimes having them as a collaborating partner at that beginning will really help set up a lot of the success, because I think perhaps what you will know is it is about sustainability and keeping things on the track, because as soon as you're on the track with releasing episodes, you don't really want it to crash and burn and fall off the track. So I'm like, we're keeping the train running, and that's what a producer can imagine. When I was in live radio, the producer role sometimes was so much more electric because it is about the immediacy of what's happening on air right now. There's technical, there's host planning, there's prep. You're thinking about the next 5 minutes on air, you're thinking about the next 10 minutes on air, you're thinking about the next 15 minutes, and so on and so on and so on. Like you are actually thinking about everything at the same time all at once. And perhaps, people produce differently, but that's how my brain works, is that at any minute of the time, I'm sort of like clocking, what is the host needing? What is he talking about? What is she talking about right now? What is she going to talk about into the future? And what's my plan A to Z of what they will need as backup? So it's essentially very much like the supportive role. You can imagine there's a lot of people who do get very attached to the producers in their lives because it is such a beautiful safety net to have somebody looking after you like that. So sometimes a production like in the actual recording of an episode, but then you are doing a lot of that project management and forward planning in the day-to-day of like what's going to happen in 8 weeks time. How can I orchestrate something today that will have the effect I need for the show's growth in 3 months time? So a producer can be many things, and you know there's so much crossover between a film producer and a TV producer now than ever before, which I'm amazed by. And I sort of love, because I love where innovation is happening.
Definitely. And even we were talking just before we started recording, like the set design and like how you can make that invoke emotions and feelings. And it becomes almost a personality that comes along with the podcast now as well, which is so fun. And I want to get into that ideation and coming up with the show's ideas and concepts with you as well. Before we do, if you were going back to like say your time with Seth or Jameela
Jamil, yeah.
When you were working with those people, what did sort of a day in the life look like for you then?
So when I was working with some of the big name celebrities, it would be, is the show always on or is it a series? And I do love this area of production, is that no day is ever really the same because the topics change, the guests change. But from a producer's point of view, you know, you are sitting there managing the recording just to check. And then you are getting the audio files and editing it as well. So during a week, a producer can do quite a lot. Maybe they're editing 1 or 2 shows, but maybe some of the other teams, like the Bitch Sesh, they have an external editor who was editing the shows. So then you would just get it and then publish it. So that type of role of producer is that you're less in the weeds editing, but you're just managing and then publishing. So it really does depend. Every week was always a bit different. I was an EP and I was also a people manager. So I was managing these producers. And so at one stage when I was working in the States, there was 2 of us EPs and we had around 27 shows. So if you imagine that's every week, there's 27 deadlines that are needing to be made. We're all managing teams of producers to see who's meeting those deadlines, double checking what people need. And so it's a different kind of producing then. You're producing people and checking that they and their work is where it's needing to be, because with episodes getting made at that frequency, you are working with a producer and an engineer, and then perhaps there might be a third manager who would be checking the audio, and then the publisher would be checking. So one episode at that level could be listened to 4 times, not to mention the time of recording as well.
Yeah.
You want to make sure what's going out is absolutely exceptional. And with 4 people's ears on something, it's rarely things will get missed. But yeah.
And what is like that process to get an episode out into the world, right? So how much is it before someone jumps behind the mic, like in that preparation?
Oh, yeah.
And trying to come up with like the concept and the idea and what you're going to talk about versus like the engineering and not engineering in terms of mixing, mastering, like those sort of processes. Talking in terms of like the strategic editing that comes afterwards.
Yeah.
How much is that balance and like where does that fit?
Yeah, so I would imagine, again, it depends on the content and the level of prep that's sometimes needed for a show. Say for like Bitch Sesh, it's about housewives. You're going to have to watch the show or whatever they're up to at that time. You're going to brief the guest. You're going to book the guest. So the guest also needs to watch the show. So there is a little bit of like, okay, these episodes are live at these times, but thanks to like technology and preview screenings, often they could watch them before they went live as well. Some other shows that we were involved with, there were levels of like advice and comedy. There's a beautiful comedy podcast called Urgent Care that was around the pandemic times. It was very much needed for the community and understanding a little bit about what everybody is going through mental health wise, but the 2 comedians just had some beautiful advice to share. People would write in. So you imagine there's like a lot of curation there that the producer is going through to go, great, these are things that I know the hosts will love to talk about. And, you know, they're new stories for them. So from an advice point of view, they would gather that up and make sure the host can access easily in the moment, as well as like any extra preparation or background that's needed. So even getting to the recording, there can be so much prep work, and a producer can be involved in that. And in terms of like the recording process is where you're recording, how you're recording, if you're over on the computers, if you're not. And I have a bit of that live show live production in me that if somebody's like asking for a name, I'm Googling it and I put it in the chat if I'm online. And, you know, those kind of things, like I've worked with Jameela Jamil. I've worked with like the bitch Sesh girls like I spoke about. There's some level of like just adding some little extra information in case they need it. And sometimes they go and grab it and sometimes they don't need it.
Yeah. So. And if they were like, say you're sitting in on a recording here and you're hearing the conversation and you could see there was potential to jump into another area or a topic, is that something that you would generally like jump in and say in that moment as well?
I think there's a balance out of like some of the producers I managed, they ran Nicole Byer and Sashia Zameta's podcast. It's called Best Friends. They're two best friends. They're lovely women. It is very hilarious. Both producer and engineer were always on mic if they were called on mic. One of the producers, her name's Kimmy, and so they called her Kimmy on the keys because she was very fast on the keyboard. And so often they would say, Kimmy on the keys, please, what is the name for this thing? And so Kimmy would jump on mic to say and share. I definitely have a lot of thoughts about how much a producer should be on mic.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on the topic. It depends on the host. Sometimes I love it. Sometimes I would be like, too much. Why is the producer there? And I would be like, who? Can I swear?
Yeah, of course you can. Yes, you can.
I'm like, who the fuck is this? Really? Sometimes if I'm new to a show, it is often the thing that I'm asking is like, who the fuck is this person? Like the show is this, right? Who's this extra? So, yeah, and I think like some people, if you're in that community well, you understand the show, it's valid for sure. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, and understanding your audience. I think that's been so interesting though. Like the Kardashians, I feel like they did such a good job of like breaking that fourth wall and they started bringing their producers in and you're like, oh, this is like the behind the scenes. You see it a little bit more. We are seeing it in the podcasting world now too. Yeah. But I think like you are so right in that time and place and like what is the purpose of bringing them in, I think
of what is the value to your listener? Like what is the value to you going and intentionally turning on your mic to share something for the listener? Because ultimately I always think of the person at home, you know, the listener is the most valuable thing in general because it's your community, it's your audience. And I think there is a bit of a disconnect between like the idea that the audience is a faceless group. You know, so I feel like the listener, we value their time, we appreciate their time because they're physically pressing play to listen to what you have got to talk about.
Yeah.
Whether that is just a rolling thing here and there that maybe a YouTube file can just then click on to the next. We still need to say like, hey, you, how are you going? And you're here with us today in this conversation.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of craft ideas that have just been my experience over the years about how to include the listener. And I always think it as the one person. I know there could be like 50 people. There could be hopefully many, many more people, right? Yeah. But I feel it as a solo consumption thing. So the listener is the person I'm thinking about, and I think it's the most valuable part of the puzzle.
Definitely. And I really want to touch on this with you because I think it's so key. Like when you say, hey guys, like you don't feel like you're talking to everyone then, but when I say like you and I'm talking to you,
exactly.
Let's talk through some of these
Shall
strategies.
We? Yes, my favorite.
Please. It's so good, and I think it's the key to a show, right? Like because otherwise, if you don't have a community, like what are you doing behind there? And I think it is key to bring them in. How can people bring their listeners into the show?
So I really feel that the hey guys is the main example because the hey guys means that are you talking to as many people as you think you're talking to? Great. You'll probably get 1,000 comments on the YouTube clip. Great. When you're saying, hey guys, it feels like you're isolating us because I'm not listening in an arena full. Like if Sabrina Carpenter is like, hey guys, at a huge arena, I would be like, yes, I'm there with you, Sabrina. You can hey guys me anytime. We're all here. Hey y'all, right? Yeah. We are all in the arena with you. I feel included then. But if I'm pressing play on my little Pocket Casts app and I hear a, hey guys, how's it going? I'm like, but it's just me in my car. There's no other person with me. It's me. And I want to be in this one-on-one with you, the host, and your guest perhaps, or the podcast producer or the co-host or the gang of comedians, right? So there is very much, we're not sitting in a room full of 10 people listening to the podcast. Hey guys. So there is a little difference with the YouTube space, and I can understand because sometimes we do watch YouTube clips with other people. But in the same way, I really think it's the way to use your language and vernacular to think. Who is the important person here? It's the listener. So I do feel like it's in your scripting. Now, when I say scripting, I'm never saying please write a script and read it off at all. A lot of my career, because of being in live radio, I have written for the spoken word. So I'm thinking about that host and I'm thinking, how would they say it? How would they be reading this and then put it in their own words? But I would also think of the person that always when you talk to, you get a reaction out of, you get a smile. In my radio days, I sometimes would meet people around Australia, and there was probably an amalgamation of a woman, and she might have been 19 or 20 years old that was a uni student because of the demographic of Triple J. So I'd see this smiling face in the audience sometimes if we did live shows, but I would imagine a whole life around her. And she was my girl from Adelaide. She was 19, 20, going to uni. Then she'd drive to her part-time job in Adelaide, because I wanted to think about her outside of the city. And I would think, what would she like to hear about today? And so then I would write my script talking to her. I would say, how are you? And, you know, you might be going about your day. You might have just got back from uni. You might have just like jumped in the car, pressed play, listened to this. You are here with me. And that is part of the script, of creating that intimacy, imagining what that person's life is like. Often we are in the car, often we are in people's actual like brains, right? Yeah. Our voices are sitting in the ears of a human right now. And I find that to be so intimate. It's so beautiful. And, you know, you can imagine what we're looking like if you're listening right now. And I really think that that is a real powerful thing. And so I have to give a lot of credit here, because there is somebody who you can look up to hear a little bit more about this radio craft of like how to engage and how to write and how to think about this listener. And her name's Valerie Geller. And when I was a young ABC producer just starting out, I had a workshop with Valerie, and it was really informative of how a lot of this radio craft and how you can be so intimate. And she's written a lot of radio craft books, podcast craft books. There's a lot of phrases that she would use, like be genuine. And if you're curious, your audience is curious. And I think that genuineness, like that's been part of my career for like 25 years now. There's a lot of beauty in the niche and the one-on-one, and especially the things that you're doing. That's why I think I said, what's your audience? What do they want to know? Because it's more, I think it's more valuable rather than being like, I did this. It's like, well, have a think about how you're talking to that one person when you're sitting down to record your podcast. You're creating space for them. Their time is valuable.
Yeah. And I think it's so incredible to think about it like that, and that person that you're trying to connect with. And what are they really looking for? Like, what can be the one thing that they take away from this conversation that actually they can go and implement? And whether that's implement because they've listened to a tactical episode or it's something that makes their day and they laugh and they're like, you know, looking for that.
Yeah, the heartfelt stuff. So an example I can share with you that you can go and look up, if you don't mind a plug.
Yeah, of course.
By Linda Marigliano and I started a podcast, and she left a job. It was a dream job working at the national radio station. The next month was going to move to LA to be with her long distance partner. They've been long distance for 4 years. She'd been living in Sydney. He was in LA. They were back and forth for 4 years. She moved her whole wardrobe over there, her whole things. And then February 2020, she went to Japan for a job, went back to Australia, then was locked down in Australia with all the travel rules because of COVID and the pandemic. Now, her whole life was in LA at that stage, brand new life. And so she had nowhere to go apart from moving back to her childhood teenage bedroom with her dad in a townhouse in Sydney, so quite a small space during the pandemic. And she and I talked almost every week, thinking about everybody's in these sort of situations. Plans have changed for so many of us. We expected to do these things, and whether it be like a very big thing like an international move, Or it could have been like, oh, I really wanted to just do my outdoors activities that I can't do now, or whatever health kick you might have changed. You might have started a new job and then you found that you had to just be in the office meeting all your colleagues over Zoom. So everybody had this universal feeling of change. So to use Linda Marigliano's Tough Love podcast, we looked at 4 certain themes that people would connect with, but also then have their own versions of takeaways, like thought starters or feeling less alone. So every episode we thought, oh, is this an episode about our relationship with our family? And we would explore that theme and then give people a little bit of not lessons like you must do this, but just here's an idea for you to think about. And we launched in 2021, so it was still a little lockdown for Australia during that time. I wanted to imagine that Linda was just sitting on your shoulder as you were doing your like 5K walk or whatever you were doing if you're in Melbourne or around the world, just listening and thinking things will be okay. I'm less alone. I can think about a few things of how to talk to my parents now in a new way. Or Linda's gone through this whole long distance relationship and she's still not reunited with her partner. That's exactly like my friend. She's in that same situation, but she's this part of the world rather than this. And there's so many universal themes. So definitely thinking about the listener in that case, I was like, well, she's a 31, 32-year-old girl and her life has changed. And I would be thinking about that. Linda and I would talk about, we called her the cool girl. We were like, what's that cool girl thinking about? What's she up to? And we would be like, is this too specific for Linda's life? How can we make it a little bit broader? Because sometimes we don't need all the details, but we need a little bit of like inclusive so we can imagine our lives and imagine how we can change things, perhaps just from a little podcast episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're looking at like, let's try and use an example of this. If you were talking about something and you weren't making it expanded, you were just talking about your personal experience versus something that is actually going to allow other people to see themselves in that.
Yeah.
What would be an example of one versus the other?
Every time I listen to a podcast, I get so excited about all the things I've heard. I can't wait to implement them in my business. And then life happens and I don't do anything with it. And I don't want this podcast to be that for you. I want you to take action and actually be able to implement these things that you're learning today. So head to the show notes or send me the word debrief over on Instagram and I'll send you all the key takeaways from today. Because the difference isn't what you know, it's what you do. Let's get back into the show.
Yeah, so I would feel like in your scripting as well, have a think of whether you are closed and insular with what you're saying. And that can be very much like, oh, I did this, I did that, I did this. And then unfortunately this happened to me. It could be like just kind of boring details and people's brains aren't going to hold on to all the details. Oh, and then I did this and then I did that and then I did this and then I did that. And the word I is automatically closing the doors for a listener. Whereas, have you ever been in this situation where you found yourself at your childhood home looking at the pictures of yourself and your friends on the wall, the band photos, your ugly outfits, your hairstyles, your mum and dad still have them on the wall. Oh, so embarrassing. Maybe your little brother or your little sister is also there being annoying, like sort of ideas that you can imagine would be in people's lives. But I think the way you would turn it to them, and I find that open. So if I talk about myself and I say I find that closed. But if you imagine what your listener is going through and you use the word you, it's as simple as that. I would look at lines with Linda and we were like, how to make it open, how to connect more. And it's the turning of the phrases. So yeah, her nonna did this. So she wouldn't be like, my nonna said this, my nonna said that. It would be, what's your relationship like with your grandparent? If they're still here, what are the things that you would love to tell them now before they go? Because they're not going to be here with us forever. What would you want to share with them? And Linda would be, I'm going to meet up with my nonna, and there'll be a little bit of audio there of her and her nonna talking to one another. Her nonna has passed, but a lot of the tape, the two of them together was so cute, and Nonna would always be teasing Linda that there's no babies, and she's like, Nonna, I'm trapped on this side of the world. I can't get to go and have babies, you know.
Small technical issue there.
Small like technical things.
Yeah.
But I think that's the way to sort of see how would you tell a story, but then make it with the listener as open and as part of that story. So if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think that's beautiful. And something you did really well there that comes so naturally to you, I can tell as well, is the storytelling aspect of it. You know, using language that is painting a picture in someone's mind so they can actually like imagine the sights, the smells, the sounds, they're feeling like they're in that room with you because you've painted that in their mind, which I think is so special.
Yeah, and I think we can do, as much as we're in this video world, there's a lot we can still do with describe. I do have a new example. I worked with Kayla Jade. She's a TikToker here in Australia, and she's a great presence in the US as well. She's got a lot of fans over there. And Kayla's got a great back catalogue of stories, experiences that has happened to her. You can absolutely go and have a look at her podcast, but her TikTok essentially is still just as amazing and full of stories. But with the podcast, sometimes I wouldn't hear the details. And so a lot of the drafts we first did together, she was like, oh, and then I wore these heels. And I was like, oh, just before you go on, can you tell me what color were they? And then in terms of like the name she gave certain heels had different connotations. And I was like, I've never heard those terms before of whatever the heels names were. But, in different industries and things had certain names. So I was like, just describe what they look like a little more. So she would be like, great. So they were pink and they were stiletto, and then they had this big platform at the front. So you can only imagine the length of the stiletto, like 5-6 inches high and tottering along down the street. Like, so she added details, colors, like what did it look like? Did it sparkle? And I love some of the stories that she told because they were so rich with those details. I think it's bringing the listener back into the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to like a show concept for the first time. If someone's coming to you and they're like, I want to start a podcast, what do you think are kind of like the building blocks of a good show?
I definitely feel like the passion is the main thing I'm listening for a lot of the time. If people are talking about ideas to me, I'm like, are they absolutely excited for this topic, this theme? Because I think there's a little bit about like your passion and your natural curiosity of something is perhaps going to be the driver whether or not a listener cares about it as well. And so, for example, to go talk about Bitch Sesh, they're very passionate about housewives with the angle that they bring. They're both comedians. They both see a different side to the housewife universe, and it's obviously a huge passion. They call themselves like garbage people because they listen to, watch all these garbage characters, but it's fascinating. And I think having, their own takes and their angles, it's the passion that drives it. So what are you going to show up for week to week and really be passionate about? And so I think that's why, niches in the US, we say niche. Like there's definitely ways that you could think, oh, this is something I absolutely would die for, ride or die, and I would love to talk about this forever. Obviously, that's something you are thinking about with this podcast, right? What's something that I'm passionate to every week learn about, grow, dig into? It's fun, because if it's not fun, I wouldn't do it.
No, definitely not. And there's not that, like, this is a long game, right? It's not just something that you show up and you start doing a podcast. Like, it's that long game in mind of how you're going to keep coming back week after week behind the mic. With that in mind, when you're talking about like niching down, do you think that you need to have that? Like, say someone was wanting to start a business podcast. Do you think you need to have a specific niche that you're going into with that?
Okay, so with a business podcast, I would absolutely be thinking about why.
Yeah, there are so many.
All the time. And, it's great that there are so many business podcasts. I think it's fantastic. I love business to business podcasts. I don't listen to them, but I love that there are many podcasts for everybody. And I'm always from the place of saying there is never enough podcasts rather than there's too many, because there is so many TV shows, there are so many films, there are so many books, there are so many beautiful songs, there are so many beautiful albums. And I think there can just be as many podcasts. So I wouldn't be saying don't make podcasts, but I think the reason why is number one. And then the value for the listener. Like, who is your listener? And you do that for your business anyways, I'm sure. Who is the person who's buying my product? And so the thing is, am I making a podcast for the person who buys my product or uses the service? Or am I making just a piece of content that's interesting about the universe that I'm in with my business? So there's probably so many different levels, and I would be looking at why and what value you're bringing. Yeah.
And then how would you suggest that they go and find the right audience for them? Like, you've come up with this show, you think you've got a good why, you've decided what you're going to do. How would you then get it in front of the people that need to hear it?
So I would do a few layers. And my favorite area for, say, new podcasts or podcast growth is go to other podcasts. So you can see why there's a lot of guesting in the States. You know, it's been around for a very long time. Like, some of the podcasts I were working on had been running for well over 10 years already. And yes, at different times in the year, they would be like, oh, we have some live shows to promote. Why don't we do a few guesting as well and then share the audience? And then in the States, we do a lot of cross promos. And I don't think they do them as much here in Australia. I've definitely been talking about them a lot.
Yes.
And it does depend on what platform you're on to run the promos, the dynamic inserted promos. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. But I would be looking at Venn diagrams of, oh, this is my show and this show. And there is potential crossover audience here. They seem to have a similar type of listener that I would love, but I wonder if we could do a cross guesting opportunity, but also a cross promo opportunity.
Yeah.
So I have an example if you'd like one.
Yes.
When I was working with Jameela Jamil on her podcast, my friend was producing Mini Driver's podcast, and Mini Driver's a British actress. So Jameela and my friend who was producing Mini Driver's podcast, we were like, oh, wouldn't it be great? Let's do a guest swap. And so Jameela guested on Mini Driver's podcast, and then we had Mini talking on iWay, and it was very much about mental health. She told some amazing stories just about like what it was like as a actress in the 90s and how horrible it was on set.
Yeah.
Like, so much sexism, outward sexism, and she's incredible. She was so frank with some of her stories. So obviously Jameela's audience would love to go and hear what stories she told on Minnie's podcast and vice versa. And then we also, for the 2 weeks after that, ran a cross promo. Hi, it's Jameela here, Minnie's on my podcast. If you'd like to come over, have a listen as well. So that's the first easy way. Not always effective, because you have to think about what audience is similar. You know, Jameela's audience is definitely 25 to 40. Minnie's audience is perhaps a little older, but that sort of theme about being a woman in the world with the stories that they both were talking about, I knew would be a crossover anyway. So it doesn't matter that they're different demographics. I think, you know, hearing about each other's stories, one about philosophy and one about just sexism in the industry, is just wild. So yeah, so I wouldn't say, you know, if you have a business podcast, you're not going to go and look at, say, a women's mental health podcast as a shared audience, but you would be looking to say, what could that crossover be? But yeah, the promo swaps are a great one as well, because discoverability of podcasts has always been something people are thinking, oh, they got to try and fix and work it out because this platform works this way or this platform works this way. But I think the best way, most natural, is, oh, I like this host and she's guesting on someone else's podcast. Okay. Maybe I'll just tap and follow that and have a listen. I just tried it this week. I've been producing Darren Palmer's podcast. It's called Almost Home, and he had Courtney act, but as Shane, because Shane's written a book about identity. It's a beautiful new book, and so Shane and Darren talk a lot about their nostalgic time at, in Sydney in the drag community. But the note came through to me, oh, on YouTube we can now add collaborators, right? I just did that in the back end straight away. You know, within a few hours of publishing, there was all these different comments there that were from Courtney's community. And I'm like, that is so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much happening in that space, particularly like YouTube and then Netflix as well, now entering the podcasting space and the things that they're going to bring out too. I think it's really powerful time to be in podcasting.
I
It's so
agree.
exciting. When you're going into those episodes, for example, are there things that you would do within that episode to either encourage those comments back in and or just make it an episode that people want to stick around to the end with?
Yeah. In the radio world, people would call it time spent listening because you want the person to listen to the radio all day and never touch the dial. With an episode of a podcast, it is going to end. So there's definitely a lot of ways of how you would include, questions, polls. From a radio point of view, I would be asking feedback on, do you like this song? Or this is brand new thing from Lord. Let's really dig into it. What are your thoughts? So to get some instant text messages from a Triple J text line means you can read it out on air. But I love that in some of the platforms now. So yeah, having a poll. And I think that there's ways where you can thread a bit of a through line through your episodes, whether it's through segments that people might like. When I have been producing more of a documentary style podcast, I worked with a great number of people on the Daniel Johns podcast. And this is Daniel Johns started Silverchair when he was a teenager. And pretty much within the first year of them starting, he was on stage with Red Hot Chili Peppers, supporting them in the States. They just blew up really fast in the 90s. And Daniel, I'd known for a little while, but he had some things he wanted to talk about. The band broke up and the grunge era was having a bit of a resurgence anyways. I feel it was a great time. That was a Spotify original in 2021. And it's called Who is Daniel Johns? And the way that we wrote that, every episode had a little bit of a sense of a mystery to it and a bit of a will the band get back together? Will they not? And not to say that anything is mysterious about Daniel himself, but it's how much is he willing to share about himself and his experience, and who is going to join to share that story. So we would sort of do just little hooks, right, through the episodes. So you're I think I do have to find out what next episode.
Yeah, I think that's so clever. And I think anyone can kind of apply that approach to their podcasting. It's just zooming out a little bit and what can I not give away in this episode but potentially bring back in for the next week? Something that I also love that you have just recently done is that setup for the show of something that, oh my gosh, what is this show? I have to be part of it. I have to go and listen. And you've just done the most beautiful execution of this with MIF's new show that has just launched. Can you talk us behind that launch process and bringing that to life and what that looked like?
Yes. MIF and I have known each other for almost 20 years. I feel like it's only 10, but it's just the nature of things, right? And she has had obviously a great entertainment career here in Australia. MIF Warhurst has been Triple J, very much radio ground foundation. She was an old school writer, editor for some street mags as well, so definitely knows a good story. But she's always had such a unique voice. And she's on TV as well. She's great on game shows like Spicks and Specs. And as soon as I first heard her on Triple J, I was like, who is this woman? She is amazing. And she's just very relatable because she's glamorous, she's gorgeous, but she can absolutely stuff things up and be as messy as any of us. So when she knew I was coming back to Australia, MIF asked me to have a look at this project that she had always been wanting to do. She calls it a dream project. She'd been thinking about it for a while. She had previously an 8-year stint with her friend Zenro, my friend also, doing a great community building show called Bang On. And for 8 years, they talked about cultural things, beautiful moments each week in each other's lives. But it grew to I think in the 8th year, they did so many live shows across the country, met a lot of the Bang Fam, they call it. They call their audience and the community. And I think it had reached a point where they were like, great, that was a really high note to end on. But they both won Best Co-Host at last year's Australian Podcast Awards. So it was such a beautiful bow on their time together. And MIF had been thinking about doing a solo show herself, but not really sure or confident even that she could do that herself. And I feel like someone like her, of course you think, great, they'll be able to do anything. But it is such a vulnerable thing, I think, to host your own show, to put yourself out there, to maybe be a little bit more personal than what she had been previously, because when we work for legacy media, sometimes we're representing the legacy media's tone of voice as well. She'd been on radio for a long time, and some things that she wanted to explore, stories and guests she wanted to talk to, sometimes that wasn't approved. And she's like, I just want to have a fun time with my universe of listeners to see who I could talk to. What's the fun thing? And the project she's been sitting on for such a long time thinking about this dream project. She wanted to call it The Moment, and it's launched now, The Moment with Miff Warhurst. And it is pretty much about who's having a moment. What's the moment of today? If it's a newsy episode, she wanted to be always on every day. And because we wanted to do video podcasts, we met in the middle, and we're 3 times a week.
Gosh, even 3 times a week
even
is
3 times
a
a
lot.
week with a video podcast. And so the whole launch process and the branding around it, the company I'm working for is called MIK Studios. They are based in Australia, but they work globally in lots of different markets where there's audio production, audio ads, as well as digital graphics design agency. They've been around for about 25 years. I did the Daniel Johns podcast with them as well. But when Miff brought me the idea for The Moment, I knew it had to be an MIK production, because I felt like she had just needed to have a big moment of a photo shoot, a big moment of change with like 2025, 2026 sort of colors, and just something that was new and fresh for her, not just on the socials, but just everywhere. I think just to sort of have as her who is Miff out in the world when she's not with legacy media. And so I think with Miff and her audience, a lot of people are natural podcast listeners, and they've been missing bang on. They've been missing hearing Miff. Miff loves to talk about fashion and culture, and I feel her perspective is always a little bit unusual. I love listening to the podcast and the things that I can read in the news, but she'll give me a few nuggets that I can't wait to tell my husband about that. Oh, that's interesting. Just different perspectives. She's got a unique lens, and the show's been doing so well. And I see on her socials and in the comments, just people like, thanks, Miff, I really love this, or really love this vulnerable moment you're sharing. And just shows that at any stage of your life, like, just give it a go. Give something a go that is your dream show. And like Miff's been talking about it, just fuck it, just go and do it. But at one stage she was unsure, right? So I think it's like finding some good people to work with, definitely finding a team that sort of gets what you want to do if it's something that's bigger. But if it's something that's small, I think just start. Plan it ahead, plan it out.
Of course, yeah.
But just start.
Yeah, and thinking about that, as long as you've got that why and you know who you're talking to, I think it's really incredible that you said that, like, someone like Miff still had those doubts. There'll be so many people that are right now thinking, I really want to start a podcast. Yeah. I'm so scared. She was too.
She was too, right?
Yeah.
And there's some conversations that we had together, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing, but I had been living in the States for a little while, and I became an American when I was over there too. So now I'm a dual citizen. But I would say to Miff, I'm like, Americans do it. Americans would have already done this. Like, I would say that I'm a little bit more braggadocious now than what I perhaps used to be before I lived overseas. And I just feel like there's a lot of chutzpah. There's a lot of stuff you're like, just fuck it, just do it. And other people are going to do it. And the zeitgeist, right, is very strong. And we launched The Moment with Miff Warhurst maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks after. It was like, oh, Charlie XCX has announced her film name, The Moment. Next year is coming out. And I was like, so it is, right? When something has a moment, it's a zeitgeist thing. There's a lot that will just ripple through. And it's surprising. We use the pun, or like it comes up in conversation. Oh, so-and-so's having a moment. We're like, yes. So it's kind of like, yeah, if you're not going to do it, somebody else is going to do it. But I think if it's an idea and, yeah, plan it out, think about it. And sometimes that vulnerability could be a bit of that superpower. I know that's also a buzz term. People say, what's your superpower? But I think if your experience can be related to other people as well, like people can relate to you with that vulnerability, it's really, yeah, it is important.
Definitely. And I think with Miff as well, her, like the whole experience around The Moment, that again goes back to what you were talking about earlier around that community and bringing them in, and they feel like they're part of something, and people will see something now and they'll be like, oh, like that they're having a moment, and think of that as well, which is amazing. Okay, you've just spoken at South by Southwest as well, which was an incredible event all put together, and I know MIK had a huge presence there as well. What do you think is coming next for the world of podcasting?
It has moved very fast these last 2 years in general, and yes, video podcasting I think was always going to have this like drive and a push. I feel that we probably need about maybe another year of settling in to see where the audiences actually are, because it feels like it's a little bit of like, let's just try an experiment time, which I love. I definitely love the innovation of like, let's just see. And a lot of us perhaps are going through that. Where shall I put my energy? Where shall I put my priority? You know, this year with Good Hang, with Amy Poehler launching, I loved seeing that launch. I had seen at different times various pitches that had come through when I was working in the States, like other podcasts that she was developing. And she did do a more of a character-driven podcast a couple of years back, which was interesting. But it was all improvised comedy. And so when Good Hang launched, I was like, perfect. It's so simple. It's very her universe. We know that her Parks and Rec nostalgia has always been strong. But instead of doing that as a rewatch show, or instead of doing that on someone else's show where she would guest, why not have her own show? And it is a YouTube show. It is a clip show. I haven't ever really finished a whole episode all the way through myself because I love the clips. So I am a member of the Good Hang audience, but I only watch clips. But I'm sure that's a lot of us as well. But some people probably have Amy Poehler in the ear hole the whole time. So I do feel like, the celebrity podcast is not done. I love celebrity podcasts. Should every celebrity have a podcast? Maybe, if they had the right concept. But I think it just depends. But what I love about the Amy Poehler, she was doing her research and development for like 10 years maybe. What's the podcast for me? And whether or not this one will stay around, I think it is a good snapshot of like the Amy world. She has a lot of friends in the industry, and I think she can get a unique story out of them as well, which is, you know, it has to be a bit of the rapport too. But yeah, in terms of future, but I think what will happen is, I hope it's less of an influencer space because it's more of a community space.
This has been amazing, Amelia. We've got mic drop questions, very quick, our version of rapid fire questions. What is a podcast that is regularly in your rotation, and why do you keep coming back to it?
Okay. So a podcast that's regularly in my rotation is very surprising to me that it's still there. And it's Case File.
Oh, yes.
Because I feel that it's the most consistent. It is absolutely very straightforward storytelling. It's respectful to victims. Obviously, if you don't know Case File, it's from Australia, but it sort of looks at crimes or cases around the world and tells them in a way that is not sensationalized, definitely centers the victim and the victim's families. And it has sort of a neutral approach to the crimes. And so it is a little bit forensic in that way. So I feel like that's the one that I do come back to every week. But I sample lots of other shows, but I perhaps don't stick to them. I surprised myself with that.
Yeah, that is good. I don't think we've even had that before from any of our guests. So I love that.
Really?
Yeah, I love that.
Oh my gosh. No, the producer I work with at MIK, we both were like, la, la, la. And then we both were like, we both listen to Case File. That's our sort of our mutual thing, which is fun. But yeah, I just love I love sampling. What's the concept on a new show? Oh, who's this person? Oh, like random.
Yeah,
so,
there's so many good shows out there at the moment. Amazing. What is one last piece of advice that you'd give to someone wanting to start or grow their podcast?
I think a piece of advice, if you want to start or grow, if you want to start, I think really look at the why you're starting, and then also think of what's your unique lens to the thing that you want to talk about. And just say, you want to talk about movies and you are obsessed with movies, you love old movies, you love new movies, maybe there's a perspective that you feel that you have. So I would really look at what is that angle that is just yours. And could it be that it's absolutely just horror movies? Could it be that it's just this genre? Or could it be that, you know, you grew up on this type of nostalgic films, or the way that your family all came about was about this film? And so could that be the catalyst for why? So I would really look at what's the unique story? What is the thing that lights you up with that topic that you want to do? And what is that thing that you do want to show up for? There's a podcast, Dead Eyes, that essentially started because Tom Hanks told the host or told somebody that he didn't want that extra in the film because he had dead eyes. And so this message came back to the actor, and the actor started a whole podcast series called Dead Eyes, asking his friends and other people, do I have dead eyes? Was it a real thing? And then you know how they finished the podcast? Tom Hanks was on the frickin' show. And
oh my gosh.
So I think if there's a mission in your life, you could create a podcast about that mission for sure. What have you got to lose? Not getting Tom Hanks on your podcast or getting Tom Hanks on your podcast?
Exactly. And bringing those listeners, like there's a listener for everything, right? If you can think about who they are. Perfect. Well, this has been absolutely incredible. Where can people find you and how can they support you?
I love being on LinkedIn and Instagram for my professional space. So you can look up Amelia Chappelow there. I do post a lot of our projects on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. And I'm currently with MIK Studio, so you can see the work that we're doing here. We're looking at a lot of global podcasts and all video podcasts. We're working with a comedian, Blair Sockie. She's an LA comedian I've known now for a couple years that has got an amazing podcast, and it's about womanhood, mental health and aliens. So Spaced Out is her podcast. Look out for that one. But I think in the future, if you give me a follow, have a connect on LinkedIn. I add everyone on LinkedIn because I am so curious about people's lives. I've got to know what you're up to. So come and say hi and say that you found me from Alicia's show. So
amazing. Thank you so much for being here. It's been absolutely incredible.
Thank you.